Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu makes a surprise secret trip to Saudi Arabia. Meanwhile, alternate Prime Minister Benny Gantz sets up a probe into the so-called submarine affair, angering many in Netanyahu's Likud party. And finally, what does it take to open a business during a pandemic? Stay tuned to find out more. United States Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on Monday finishing up the last leg of his seven-nation tour in meetings opposite Saudi Arabian Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and Pompeo tweeting that the sit-down was constructive as the two reportedly discussed various economic and security partnerships. What Pompeo failed to mention in his tweet, however, is that he and bin Salman were not alone in this meeting. In a first-of-its-kind visit, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Mossad Chief Yossi Cohen traveled to Neom, Saudi Arabia on Sunday, taking part in landmark talks between Saudi and American officials. In fact, the two spent at least 4 hours on Saudi soil, leaving Tel Aviv around 8 p.m. and returning just after midnight on the same private jet that Netanyahu used to secretly visit the state of Oman last year. Neither Israeli, Saudi, nor American authorities confirmed the visit, though. Rather, it was hinted at in a tweet by Prime Minister Netanyahu's close aide, Topaz Luk, who tweeted out that Gantz is playing politics while Netanyahu is making peace. And the trip was only later essentially confirmed through reports that the jet in use was making the rare direct flight from Tel Aviv to the Saudi Red Sea city. As for what they discussed, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo alluded to Iran's malign influence in the Gulf, the Economic Vision 2030 plan, and human rights reforms. Israel's Khan broadcaster adding that focus was also on the incoming Biden administration. But meanwhile, this allegedly trilateral meeting also gives new credence to Israeli and U.S. assertions that more and more nations are looking to normalize with Israel regardless of the state of Palestinian statehood. And Palestinian factions are picking up the same feeling. Senior Hamas official Sami Abu Zuhri demanding an explanation from the Saudis and calling Netanyahu's alleged visit an insult to the Palestinian nation and an invitation to attack Palestinian rights. Now, while the Israeli premier spoke about Iran in secret meetings in Saudi Arabia last night, it's no secret how Netanyahu actually feels on the subject, having spoken about it at length publicly just hours before his clandestine flight. Nittany Manson with the story.
ולא נאפשר לאיראן להשיג נשק גרעיני. אסור לחזור להסכם הגרעין הקודם, צריך להתמיד במדיניות בלתי מתפשרת כדי להבטיח שאיראן לא תפתח נשק גרעיני ושהיא תחדל מהתנהגותה התוקפנית כולל תמיכתה בטרור.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu issuing staunch warnings to the U.S. president-elect after Joe Biden made clear that he would absolutely rejoin the JCPOA nuclear deal with Iran under certain conditions, namely that Tehran return to strict compliance under the agreement, as well as work with allies to both strengthen and extend it to address other issues. President-elect Biden believing that reforming and re-signing the JCPOA nuclear agreement is the best move forward for all. And European counterparts to the nuclear deal, Germany, France, and the UK, meanwhile, are meeting Monday to discuss their re-entry to the deal as well. Still, the Israel premier is warning that lifting pressure on the Ayatollah regime would be a mistake, and that this stance on Iran is what formed the environment for peace in the Middle East to begin with.
בזכות טיפוח שיטתי של עוצמתנו הצבאית והמודיעינית ושל עוצמתנו הכלכלית והטכנולוגית, ומעל הכל, בזכות עמידתנו הנחרצת נגד ההתגרענות של איראן ובזכות ההתנגדות שלנו להסכם הגרעין עם איראן, מדינות ערביות רבות שינו מן היסוד את גישתן לישראל.
But on another note, Israel and the U.S. aren't at odds on everything foreign policy related just yet. Reports now showing that Tony Blinken, a former U.S. Deputy National Security Advisor to President Obama, has been tapped as Biden's pick for Secretary of State. And former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Michael Oren, calling Blinken a great diplomat and a true friend of Israel.
So what will the new Middle East look like as President-elect Biden's foreign policy team takes shape? Middle East expert and former Israeli ambassador to the United States, Dani Ayalon, joins us to discuss. Ambassador, thank you so much for being with us. Now, first off, there are reports that President Trump is attempting to solidify certain policies of his with respect to Iran, Israel, China, and elsewhere. Do you believe that Biden will want to reverse all of them?
Well, I would say that, first of all, it all depends on the persons. I think his ideology and policies are quite clear. He has a record of 40 years or more. So we know he's not going to be a revolutionary, but probably more of the same guy. Of course, he will capitalize on Trump's successes here in the Middle East in terms of Israel and Arab countries' normalizations. Iran, I'm sure that there will be close discussions with Israel. And of course, when it comes to NATO, international organizations, the Paris Climate Treaty, China, Russia, and all that, we are more of bystanders. But the personalities here are very important. With the announcements of Tony Blinken becoming the Secretary of State, I think it's a very good news for Israel, very good news for the Middle East. I know Tony personally, and he is a very good friend of the State of Israel. And I think that we will see, I would say, a continuation of Trump's vis-a-vis the Arab world. When it comes to the Palestinians, of course, we may go back to the Obama years, but not with the same strictness.
Well, so I was actually, I was going to ask you a little bit more about Tony Blinken. You know, as you described him just now, again, he's been described as a friend of Israel. You know, what are his policies exactly that makes you so confident when you say that?
Well, I think, first of all, it's multilateralism, not unilateralism. So we will see the United States back in international arena, using more soft power than before, trying to lead with, let's say, excellence values, human rights, democracy, liberty. These things will, I would say, reign supreme when it comes to American allies. So in that respect, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, other countries may have to really shape up, especially Erdogan from Turkey. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to Israel, I think that he would be much more sensitive to Palestinian interests than Trump was. And this may be the biggest challenge for Israel. But I think we have learned a lot from 8 years of Obama with the constant conflicts, which none was good for any of the sides, not to us for sure, not to the Middle East, or also not to the United States. So I think that he is a veteran of the Obama administration. So I think that his approach to the conflict with the Palestinians will be much, much more realistic and reasonable.
All right, Ambassador, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
My pleasure.
All right, well, as mentioned earlier, while Netanyahu was allegedly in Saudi Arabia for a secret trip, his coalition partner and alternate Prime Minister Benny Gantz of the Blue and White Party was sparking outcry amongst his Likud party partners. This over the formation of a new government committee to investigate the so-called submarine affair, or Case 3000, which heavily implicates several of Prime Minister Netanyahu's allies, just not Netanyahu himself. Now, the incident circles allegations of bribery amidst a multi-billion shekel state purchase of submarines from a German shipbuilder. And Gantz's probe, which will be under the auspices of the Defense Ministry, will now join alongside the general investigations. But the general inquiry has already resulted in several indictments, leading many within the coalition to accuse Gantz now of simply seeking political points ahead of possible elections. Prime Minister Netanyahu, for one, even using Gantz's own words from a few months ago against him on social media.
יש יועץ משפטי לממשלה שאנחנו תומכים בכל החלטה שלו. הוא לא מצא לנכון לפתוח את העניין הזה לחקירה. הוא חזר ובדק ולא מצא לנכון לפתוח את העניין הזה לחקירה. אז אני אצטרך להסתפק בעניין הזה בדיוק כמו...
And joining us now with more, I'm here with Israeli journalist, author, and attorney Ben-Dror Yemini. Ben-Dror, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so first off, are the Likudniks right? Is this a political ploy on Gantz's part ahead of elections?
To a certain extent, everything is political. Mainly now, maybe, of course, these days, everything is political. Now, was it justified or not? I'm not sure about it. I mean, because, first of all, so many people and I'm speaking about high-rank officials from the army and officers and so on, they are so much bothered from what happened in this story, in this submarine affair, that maybe this is a good solution in order just to understand, because many of us do not understand. I mean, we hear about a lot, we read a lot of titles, we read a lot of articles, but I'm not sure that, generally speaking, the public is aware to what really happened.
Well, but
so maybe, yes, maybe we need it. Maybe we need it, even if...
But there's my question, why would the Defense Ministry need to open up an investigation alongside the Attorney General?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good question because it's part of the problem of what we are facing right now in Israel, because many people from both sides lost any trust in the general attorney. That's what's happening. I mean, many people do not believe him because he indicted Netanyahu. Many people don't believe him because he does not make any inquiry about the submarine affair. So we have a problem. We have to admit it.
Well, but again, I keep falling back to this idea of why the Defense Ministry? Why Gantz?
Because the Defense Ministry was responsible, actually, for the purchase.
Do you think Gantz feels some responsibility? I mean, this happened before he was,
Yeah, I'm not going... If you want me to justify him, I'm not going to do it because I'm not his attorney. Not now, not in general. But I can understand the atmosphere among so many of his friends, of so many high-rank officers. I mean, they say, it cannot pass without an inquiry. That's what they are saying. I mean, and we know about the petition to the Supreme Court about why don't you order the Attorney General to begin an investigation, which somehow, without any real reason that we can understand, you do not open. Something which is stretched. Maybe, as some people say, there is a reason concerning concerning security. That's why we do not really open. I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no.
So on the other hand, though, and again, I'm playing off of what you brought up in terms of trust. If the public has mistrust for the Attorney General's office and for the general investigation process into this and other similar affairs, why would that necessarily? Why would people necessarily have more trust in the Defense Ministry? Isn't there a conflict of interest there? Because again, they are political opponents to a degree.
No, you are right. You are right. The very fact that it's going to be investigated by a political kind of body that was nominated by a politician, it will not add any trust to the whole process. Yes, you are completely right. That's from one hand. From the other hand, many people want to know what really happened, and maybe an objective kind of inquiry will give some information that we really need in order to know. Because right now, what we hear is both sides. People who hate Netanyahu and people who love Netanyahu. And we are facing a problem of mistrust to the whole system, to the whole legal system, which is the real problem right now of Israel. Will this kind of inquiry that was initiated by Gantz solve the problem? I'm not sure about. But maybe it will shade some light to the whole story. Just maybe.
All right, Ben-Dor Yamini, thank you so much for coming by.
Thank you.
I want to bring you back next time. We'll talk about your recent trip to Dubai. Congratulations.
I must say that it was just unbelievable, but we will leave it to another discussion.
We'll have to discuss that another time. Thank you again so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Moving on, Israel's battle against the coronavirus is, of course, still ongoing. The government COVID cabinet now unveiling the latest vaccine acquisitions. And Nittany Manson reporting.
בסוף השבוע אנחנו הבאנו הישג נוסף במאבק נגד נגיף הקורונה. הגענו להבנה עם חברת אסטרהזניקה לרכישת מיליוני חיסונים לאזרחי ישראל. אני מציין לכם שזה מצטרף להסכמים שהגענו עם פייזר ומודרנה על אספקת מיליוני חיסונים אחרים למדינת ישראל.
One more vaccine added to the list, the world inching closer and closer to the light at the end of the coronavirus tunnel. Prime Minister Netanyahu looking to get everyone under an umbrella of immunity as soon as possible.
המדיניות שלנו היא להביא כמה שיותר חיסונים, מכמה שיותר מקורות, לכמה שיותר אזרחים וכמה שיותר מהר. כל אזרח ואזרחית בישראל שירצו בכך יוכלו להתחסן. והכלל שקבעתי הוא עדיפה היערכות יתר מהיערכות חסר.
But again, a viable vaccine is still months away at best from being issued to the general public. And in the meantime, the state is still reopening little by little, despite infections continuing to rise at an infection rate of roughly 2.3%. In fact, Deputy Health Minister Yoav Kish on Sunday argued that lifting restrictions any further would certainly lead to a third round of lockdowns, adding that if we're responsible, we'll only open according to a set plan and with testing. But far from heeding the warnings, more and more businesses are reopening. Some malls belonging to the Ofer Group even defying restrictions and police attempts to shut down on Monday. And this as 5th and 6th graders are expected to return back to classrooms later this week. Meanwhile, active infections are now at roughly 8,480, the death toll likewise rising to 2,810. Deputy Health Minister Yoav Kish, however, does offer a glimmer of hope, saying that new, more efficient testing methods will aid in the country's return to a semblance of normalcy.
Now, on another note, the novel coronavirus is up and down in the Jewish state, but in the Palestinian Gaza Strip, a sharp rise in COVID infections is now threatening to completely overwhelm the fragile medical system.
يعني تمر الآن بحالة غير مسبوقة من ارتفاع عدد الحالات للمصابين في قطاع غزة. بدأت الأسرة المخصصة للعناية المكثفة بالنفاذ. سيكون هناك يعني امتلاء لهذه الأسرة ولن يكون هناك إمكانية لاستقبال أعداد أخرى، وبالتالي الخيارات المتاحة أمام الجهة المكلفة بإدارة هذا الملف أعتقد هي الإغلاق الشامل للقطاع في غضون أيام إذا استمر هذا الوضع على ما هو.
El Manama then going on to explain that upwards of 79 of the Gaza Strip's 100 ventilators are already in use, while another Gaza health official argues that within a week they'll be unable to care for the growing number of patients. The infection rate among those tested now at a frightening 21% and growing. That said, it's unclear how the threat will be addressed, especially as rocket fire continues to emanate from the Strip towards Israeli civilian communities, leading Israelis to close down borders with Gaza. Ironically, though, analysts believe that Hamas's rockets are themselves a cry for attention as the pandemic in the Strip grows more dangerous. Now, amidst the tragedy of the pandemic, some opportunities have been presented to those in the right position to see them. But between lockdowns, restricted openings, and financial issues due to the unemployment crisis, opening or sustaining a new business can be impossibly daunting. So, what should you do? Well, here to discuss some tips and tricks is Eldad Tamir, CEO and founder of Tamir Fishman Investment Group. So, Tamir, first of all, thank you so much for being with us. Now, what are some key things that someone should be paying attention for when they're thinking about starting a business?
Well, I think the number one key element is to see how the world is changing. I think the pandemic is going to go away because it's obvious that the medical world has solved the issue. And I think 1 year from now, we're going to be in a situation where the pandemic is behind us, but the economy has changed and the way people do business has changed. And I think people have to look forward to see if their business model fits the new world. Mainly digitization, mainly the way people do business. I think everything has changed from investments to how people interact, to how you sell products. So I think that's kind of the main thing. People have to look at old business models to see if they fit the new world.
And so what are the key components to knowing whether or not your business is actually pandemic proof?
Well, I would call it post-pandemic proof because I think we should all, especially businesses that are for the long term, we should look at the post-pandemic era, not the pandemic era. The pandemic is I think we're in the last year of the pandemic, but tons of things have changed. And therefore, if I have a business of, fashion, I should definitely look at how and if I can sell products and if I know how to do that on the internet. If I have a business of financial services, I should note that people don't meet as much as before. And they need to have digital platforms. They need to have an app. They want to look at data less than, you know, the personal touch of I know you and I've seen you, or a friend told me about you. Things have to be cheaper. People have to, you know, to see a bigger line of products, because people are not going to go into one shop and buy just one product, because they're not going to go into hundreds of shops to get their service. So people have to give the clients a bigger offering. It has to be digital mostly, and therefore the set of skills has to be a little different. It's a new world.
So has coronavirus made the investor community more picky?
I think the coronavirus has created kind of a going to the future. If we said here in a venture fund, or on, looking at shares, and we said, this share is going to do 10% in the next 10 years because digitization is very slow in this specific era, we're in a different place now. Therefore, I think most of the offerings have changed. You need startups who can support the digital age. I call it the digital revolution. I think that's the biggest revolution, the economic revolution since the Industrial Revolution. Let's think about that for a minute. A long time ago, in the Industrial Revolution, the beginning of the 19th century, we didn't have automated machines, and the whole world changed because of that. The way people worked, the working class, the owners class, everything has changed. So if we could go back in time, we could have probably made a lot of money if we knew where things were. And I think today we know where things are going to go. Everything in our economic world and also social world are going to change. And today it's obvious because, when things change slowly, we sometimes go through them. We don't notice them. We don't play the game with them because we're, small parts in a bigger game. But what we're seeing now, post-coronavirus, is the opposite. I mean, we all understand where things are going. Things are not going, let's take, for example, the way we eat. If you took 100 persons, let's say a year ago, people would order, once a week. They would say most good restaurants would not have ordering service. It was not really possible to eat a first-class meal at your house. And today it's possible. So once the pandemic goes away, and it will go away by the end of next year, mid next year, the restaurant world is not going to be the same. And I think that's true for almost any business. And therefore, we have to play the game of this huge transition.
All right, Eldad Tamir, thank you so much for spending this time with us. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight, you can expect partly cloudy skies and cool lows of about 55 degrees Fahrenheit or 13 degrees Celsius. Then tomorrow should be cloudy again, highs slightly dropping on average to about 75 degrees Fahrenheit or 24 degrees Celsius. And now before we go, of course, let's take a look at what's going viral in Israel. Okay. It looks like the mop is upset at the stick. Yeah. I mean, wow. Leave it to ILTV producers to always stick us with a cute dog video. But that is it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.34 shekels to the American dollar and 2.56 shekels to the Canadian dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube and Roku TV pages. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you so much for watching.